10 spine-chilling Alaskan towns with sinister secrets, unexplainable horrors revealed. Sarah gripped the steering wheel as they approached Coldwater Bend. Her heart raced not just from the frigid air but from the suffocating weight of their past. The snow-capped firs lined the empty road like sentinels, watching, waiting. She glanced at Jake, his little face pressed against the window, eyes wide with wonder. But beneath that curiosity lingered her own gnawing fear. This town glittered with beauty, but an eerie sensation curled around her heart. This was no ordinary place. As they rolled into the town, the cheerful decorations for the holidays clashed with her instinctive unease. A sign read, "Welcome to Coldwater Bend." But the cheerful aesthetics masked something darker. Whispers floated through the frosty air, stories of families vanishing without a trace, never to be seen again. Shadows danced along the cobblestones as the sun sank behind the mountains, leaving sprawling darkness to creep in. Still, she tried to shake the anxiety. After all, this was a fresh start, wasn't it? Days slipped by, and the long nights made her feel enveloped in a malevolent embrace. While shopping for groceries one night, Sarah ran into the sheriff, a tall man with a disarming smile. His easy charm kept the small shop warm, yet his eyes hinted at hidden fears. Coldwater Bend has a rich history, he chuckled nervously, brushing off her inquiries as mere local folklore. But when he said history, a shiver ran down her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something grotesque was lurking beneath his pleasant facade. Later that night, as she tucked Jake into bed, her gaze was drawn to the icy window. A fleeting shadow flickered beyond the trees. Was someone watching? A cold sweat prickled her skin. She had heard tales of malevolent spirits preying on the innocent, but she dismissed them as local superstition. That was until tonight. What if they weren't just stories? What if danger was closer than she thought? Then Jake met the neighbor boy, Noah. He was bright-eyed, charming, and seemed like a perfect friend. But something about his incessant insistence on exploring the surrounding woods sent a pulse of dread through her. Children's laughter filled the air, but as Christmas approached, that laughter faded into an unsettling silence that gripped the town with tension. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones. With each passing day, she sensed their watchful stares, their knowing looks that suggested they were hiding something dreadful. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. It was a chilling night when everything changed. The moon hung low, heavy in the sky like a dreadful omen. Panic set in when Sarah realized Jake was missing. Adrenaline poured through her as she stormed through the town, desperately searching, her heart pounding louder than ever. The sheriff's reassuring facade melted away with every questioning glance. He murmured something about the pacts of the town as pity twisted his lips. As she tore through the snow, anguish gripped her heart. Each step felt heavier, like she was being pulled back into the depths of Coldwater Bend's sinister lore. Silhouettes loomed in the shadowy woods, silence draped the streets, and the very air felt charged with the unknown. Buried secrets clawed their way to the surface, and with each revelation, it became hauntingly clear in this town, the darkness came alive, and time was running out for her and her son. The sound of footsteps echoed through the stillness, leaving her breathless. Who, or what, will find her first? The air was suffocating, heavy with the scent of pine and something deeper, a metallic tang that invaded Sarah's senses. She stumbled through the deepening snow, panic clawing at her throat. Jake! She screamed, her voice swallowed by the oppressive quiet. Trees loomed overhead, their skeletal branches twisting and curling as if reaching for her, urging her to turn back. A chilling laugh echoed from somewhere within the woods, not far from her. The sound was sharp, cutting through the cold like a knife. It was Noah. Come on, Sarah. He called, his tone deceptively playful. He's with us. Her heart raced at the implications as she sprinted toward the laughter. She pushed through the branches, the cold seeping into her bones. The woods were tricking her senses. In the faint moonlight, she spotted a clearing, illuminated by a ghostly glow. There, circling a small fire were shadows, flickering like candles in the wind. She recognized Jake's laughter mingling with Noah's, but it carried an eerie echo, like it belonged to something other than her son. "Jake!" She yelled again, fear mounting with each passing moment. She stumbled toward the flickering light, each step leading deeper into the chilling embrace of the forest. As she emerged into the clearing, the sight struck her like a punch in the gut. Her son, seated cross-legged, stared intently into the flames, entranced. Noah stood beside him, his eyes shining unnaturally bright, reflecting the orange glow like a hungry predator. The other figures around the fire slowly turned their heads, their faces obscured by shadows but their gazes piercing and hungry. "Sarah, join us." Noah beckoned, his voice sweet as honey yet tainted with malice. "We were just waiting for you. This is where the fun begins." The subtle shift in his voice felt wrong, like an animal-esque growl beneath the gentle facade. She rushed toward Jake, grabbing his shoulder, shaking him gently. "Honey, we need to go. Now." A shiver raced through her as Jake's blank expression met hers, an unsettling calmness in his eyes that made her heart pound harder. "No, Mom," Jake murmured, his voice eerily different from before. "We're playing a game, a secret game. They want to share it with you." "Share what?" Her voice quivered as dread constricted her throat. The breath of the trees swirled around them, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to know. Noah's grin widened, revealing teeth too sharp for a child. "The kind of game that brings friends closer forever." The surrounding figures stepped closer, their movements almost in sync, as if they were one entity, a single dark mass cloaked by the moon's pallid light. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She felt the dread consuming the air, wrapping around her like a rope tightening, suffocating her reason. They weren't just kids. They were something else entirely, and she was trapped in this horror show brought forth by the town's sinister legacy. "Mama?" Jake's voice was a soft whisper now, laced with a fear that cut through the darkness. "Help me." Panic surged. She pulled him up, her heart racing, ready to fight off whatever this twisted game had become. "No!" She screamed, urgency pouring out of her. "We're leaving." But the figures closed in, their eyes glinting with a hunger that went beyond mere play. The fire roared, flames shooting up, illuminating faces that twisted with the thrill of hunting. Sarah felt the grip of dread tighten around her, a whisper echoing in her mind. There was another pact she didn't know about, one they hadn't yet spoken aloud. "Why don't you stay for just one more round?" Noah said, his voice dripping with sweet menace. In that moment, she knew. This wasn't a game. This was a trap, and with it, the frigid air grew even colder, wrapping around her like a deathly whisper. All Sarah could think was that time was slipping away. With the darkness closing in, what would she sacrifice to save her son? And what price would Coldwater Bend demand? The ground trembled beneath her feet, as if the town itself was awakening with quiet anticipation. A chill wind gusted through the clearing, scattering the firelight and making shadows leap and dance. Sarah's grip tightened on Jake's shoulder. "We need to go," she pleaded, her voice thick with desperation. But he just stared into the fire, eyes glazed as if a veil had descended over his mind. Noah stepped closer, the other figures shifting behind him like a dark tide. Their whispers crept towards her, slithering around her thoughts, urging her to listen, to understand. "Don't you see, Sarah?" he hissed, his voice melting into the cold night. "He's found something special, something you've kept from him." "Jake, please!" she cried, shaking him harder. "Look at me. We're leaving, right now." But Jake only chuckled softly, a sound that sent a shiver racing down Sarah's spine. "You don't get it, Mom," he said, voice trailing off into a laugh that was not wholly his own. "We're part of the game now." Suddenly, a shrill scream burst through the woods. It was a woman's voice, sharp and panicked, echoing the same terror that churned in Sarah's gut. Eyes widened, she whipped around, searching for the source. "No! Please!" The cry faded quickly, swallowed by the trees. "Others have come before you," Noah said, tilting his head as if considering her closely. "They just didn't last. But the fun's still here." "Fun?" Sarah almost laughed, her mind swirling. "This isn't fun. That's not how it works." The ground shivered again, more violently this time, as if the ancient forest itself was growing restless. The flames flickered, threatening to extinguish, casting eerie shadows. The figures were no longer children, their skin glistened with an unnatural sheen, their faces gaunt and stretched, echoing a hunger that settled in the pit of Sarah's stomach. She felt sick. "Noah, what have you done?" She breathed, a desperate inflection in her voice, pulling Jake tighter to her side. He only smiled, baring those unnaturally sharp teeth, his eyes dancing with unholy light. "It's simple. You can play and join us or be sacrificed to the forest. Your choice, really." He turned his gaze toward the cold, watchful trees, inviting them into the conversation as if they were allies. "No, no." Sarah shut her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the encroaching dread. Anxiety pressed on her chest like a weight. "You're all sick. This isn't my son." But as she opened her eyes again, she saw the truth in the others' faces, twisted with delight at her turmoil. They were not just playing a game, they were eager for blood. "Mom!" Jake called, his voice trembling, breaking her heart. "I don't want to leave them. They're my friends." "Friends?" She could hardly breathe the word. "Jake, they're not your friends. They are hunters," Noah interrupted, letting the word hang heavy in the air, dripping with malice. "We all are. Forever bound to the forest. You can either join the ranks or run. But know this, it really never ends." In a panic, Sarah tried to pull Jake away, but he stood his ground, determined, the fire reflecting his doe-like innocence. "Join us, Mom." "Stay with me," he urged, but she saw a flicker of something dark lurking in his eyes, something that clearly wasn't him. "The choice is made, dear Sarah," Noah said, his voice a soothing hiss that masked the danger. "But it's not yours to make. The forest has already chosen." Just as that cold realization hit her, dark shapes began to ripple through the trees, shifting closer, their movements predatory, circling them like vultures sensing prey. A creaking, rasping noise echoed through the woods, the sound of branches bending as if the trees were straining to listen in. The clearing transformed into a stage, a sacrificial altar bathed in flickering light and screams silenced by fear. With everything at stake, Sarah felt sheer terror gripping her. It crushed every logical thought in her mind. What price would she pay to save Jake? What kind of mother was she willing to become as the forest closed in? "Choose," Noah whispered again, giving her no time to consider, just a single breath before the game truly began, and then, with one fierce tug, the ground beneath her feet gave way. An earth-shattering crack reverberated, and as the fire flared higher, she was engulfed in darkness. Would they be lost to the shadows? Or was there a way to break this curse that bound them all? The forest held its breath, waiting for her answer. The earth swallowed her whole. Sarah felt herself falling, the darkness swallowing every remaining shred of light. She tried to scream, but the air turned to ice in her lungs and her body felt weightless, as if she were suspended in black water. Just when she thought she might hit the bottom, the ground broke beneath her with a cacophony of shifting roots and old soil. She landed softly, disoriented but alive, in a place that smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. The shadows didn't just surround her here, they enveloped her, pressing against her skin, crawling up her arms like thousands of tiny, whispering fingers. "Jake!" she yelled, her voice barely echoing. The suffocating silence responded with nothing but the rustling of leaves above her, as if the forest itself was mocking her desperation. Scrambling to her feet, Sarah looked around. The darkness had thickened, twisting into grotesque shapes that threatened to swallow her whole. She was alone in a nightmare of her own making, and she could feel the weight of unseen eyes studying her. "Is this what you wanted?" she whispered, knowing she was far from finished. "Is this the game?" But no answer came, only the chilling rustle of branches, like laughter waiting to burst from the trees. Gritting her teeth, she pushed forward, guided by the fleeting memory of Jake's laughter. "Stay close," she urged into the silence, each step revealing the grotesque beauty of this dark place. The trees towered like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting cruelly over sharp stones. Something horrible lived here, something that thrived in shadows. As she moved deeper, flashes of light flickered in the distance, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. Sarah's heart raced as she approached a clearing that opened up to a grotesque spectacle. Flickering lights danced along the edges of the trees, illuminating scenes that made her stomach churn. The hunters she had seen earlier had not simply circled them, they had taken trophies from past victims. Naked mannequins, situated just beyond the reach of the faint glow, were strung up like marionettes, their features twisted in expressions of horror, their eyes hollow. She moved away, breath catching in her throat as she stumbled back. This had been the fate of others, offered up to the forest like sacrifices. "No, this can't happen to us," she urged herself, shaking violently. Fighting despair, her mind raced for options, for a plan. She couldn't let herself be consumed. Where was Jake? That thought drove her ahead, deeper into the malevolence wrapping around her. A sudden sound broke through her frantic thoughts, a soft sobbing. It was faint, primal, pulling at her heart as if it had a physical form. Following the noise, she plunged through the underbrush until she reached another clearing, smaller and more intimate. Her breath caught again. There, at the center of the trembling pool of blood-red light, was Jake, bound and terrified, surrounded by the figures of the others. Their eyes glinted like foxfire, reflecting her raw panic and fury. They were weaving something in the air, words or curses, chanting an arcane language that filled the space, thickening the very air into something palpable. "Jake!" she shouted, voice breaking. His head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. "Mom, run!" he cried, and the sound sent fear racing through her veins. "Please don't stay." "No. I want to leave you," she screamed, fighting against an invisible force that threatened to push her away. The chanting rose, vibrant and harsh, drowning out his words. Shadows circled around Jake, a chorus of whispers joining the sadistic song, weaving tighter, trapping him in the noose of their curse. "Join us, Sarah." Noah's icy voice emerged, cutting through the ensnaring chant. "Join the game. You cannot save him alone." With darkness creeping closer, wrapping around her limbs and drawing her in, Sarah's heart pounded louder than the frantic beat of desperation. The flickering light began to dim, and for a terrifying moment, she felt the unmistakable pull of surrender. But then another whisper emerged from her own mind, strong and clear: "Fight." As Sarah took a breath, solid determination filled her. Maybe she couldn't take on the forest or the hunters, but could she find a way to turn them against each other? Before she could plot a course, however, the ground quaked again. The trees shook as the shadows screamed in rage, echoing the tension that cocooned their fate. That desperate second before the abyss swallowed her whole left only fear and an unfathomable choice lingering between her and the ancient darkness. What could a mother do against an unseen world of terror? And as she gathered her strength for the inevitable clash, an idea surged through her mind: a chance to defy the darkness. But would it be enough? In that moment, the forest held its breath, waiting for a spark of defiance or final despair. Sarah's heart raced as shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, the feeling of being watched intensifying. There was a primal energy in the air, thick and suffocating, wrapping tighter around her like a serpentine grip. The chanting persisted, wrapping around her mind, coaxing her to give in, to join the dark dance. But she wouldn't fight, she whispered, clenching her fists to steady herself. Her eyes darted back to Jake. He was struggling against his bonds, fear etched across his face. That sight alone was enough to ignite her anger. "Let him go," she shouted, the words bursting from her lips with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The figures around Jake turned, their movements fluid and nightmarish, shadows twisting into unholy shapes. In that moment of distraction, Sarah rushed forward, determined to break through whatever barrier lay between her and her son. The forest screamed at her, branches clawed and tugged at her as if trying to keep her from the clearing. "Leave him alone." But the air thickened, pulling back at her with a force that made her stumble. She could feel their power, ancient and vicious, and each step became a battle against gravity, against dread. Suddenly, Noah stepped into her path, his eyes gleaming with the malevolent light that distorted his features into a ghastly grin. "Why fight, Sarah?" he taunted, voice dripped with honeyed malice. "You could join us. It's easy, just surrender." "No!" Sarah cried, desperately shaking her head. She gathered herself, pushing all her fears down as she took a step forward. "I want to let you take him. I want to let you take anyone else." Noah edged closer, the scent of rot filling the air around him. "Others have tried, you know. But this place thrives on despair." His voice lost its sweet surface, becoming icy, hollow. "You will submit. They always do." His words ignited something inside her, a blaze of urgency. The sight of Jake, eyes wide and pleading, sparked a rallying cry in her chest. She reached down inside herself, a reservoir of motherly strength, and felt her will solidify. "You underestimate me, Noah. I will save him." In a surge of determination, Sarah cast her gaze around the clearing, searching for anything that could help. The flickering lights twinkled mockingly, revealing remnants of past victims, their despair echoing through the air. But as she looked closer, she noticed something among the twisted forms of the mannequins, whose features echoed silent screams of anguish. She spotted something glimmering. Taking a chance, she dashed toward it, and with every step, the force of the shadows increased, pushing against her as if the darkness itself wanted to keep her from reaching the light. In the midst of the grotesque figures, she spotted an old, rusted knife embedded in the ground. Jake screamed, "Mom!" The shadows hissed, swirling and wrapping themselves tighter around him, pulling at the bonds that held him to the altar of despair. Just as she reached for the knife, Noah lunged forward. "Stop her!" he commanded, but it was too late. With a surge of desperation, Sarah yanked the knife from the ground, and a shock of energy rushed through her. The shadows recoiled, hesitating upon feeling her newfound defiance. "Your game ends here," she roared, holding the knife aloft. The chanting faltered momentarily, and the fear in Jake's eyes transformed to a flicker of hope. But then the darkness surged forward, enraged, the figures around Jake howling and twisting. Noah howled in frustration, his face a mask of fury. "You think you can defy this? You will only fuel the darkness." The ground trembled beneath her feet, and Sarah felt the earth pull at her once more, swallowing its promise of salvation. She stood on the edge of a precipice, determination clashing with a creeping terror. With a fierce cry, she lunged forward, knife poised to sever the bonds holding her son captive. But just then, the forest let out a blood-curdling scream. The rustling grew to a chaotic roar, and the shadows shoved back against her, more desperate than before. Would she manage to sever Jake's ties to the darkness? Or would the forest claim them both? The air thickened with dread, and as chaos erupted, Sarah braced for the storm. With a swift motion, Sarah swung the knife down, her heart pounding. Time felt like syrup, stretching as she aimed for the ropes binding Jake. The shadows seemed to pulse, vibrant and alive, snaking toward her with increased ferocity. "Mom, please." Jake's voice was shrill, filled with raw terror. Her grip shook but she pressed on, the blade glinting in the dim light. Just as she brought it down, Noah lunged, his hands reaching for her, fingers transforming into claws. "Fool!" he screamed, his voice tearing through the air like a whip. The knife struck, wedging into the ropes. With a jarring crack, the bindings shattered. Jake bolted upright, his face a mask of disbelief. But Noah's rage erupted, the shadows clawing at Sarah, pulling her backward. "Don't you see?" Noah roared, eyes blazing. "You cannot escape this. The shadows depend on despair, and they feed on you." Jake looked to her, his eyes wide and desperate. "Mom! We have to go." As she struggled against the encroaching darkness, the knife vibrated in her grip, thrumming with energy. The ground quaked, and a sinister laugh echoed through the trees as the figures wriggled with fury at Noah's command. "Leave!" Noah's voice shook, rising above the chaos. "You cannot run from the truth. This forest will have you." With a final burst of determination, Sarah twisted the knife and plunged it deeper, feeling a pulse of warmth emanating from the steel. The shadows recoiled, screeching, as though the pain was theirs and not hers. In that instant, she felt a connection and understanding that she was more than a target. "Let us get out of here," Sarah shouted, grabbing Jake's hand. They turned to run, but the darkness poured in like an ocean, waves of despair crashing against their backs. Then, the chanting swelled again, a cacophony that filled every crevice of her mind. Visions flooded her thoughts, lost souls, trapped and screaming, their faces a blend of pain and longing. The trees whispered secrets, taunting her resolve, breathing life into her doubts. "Sarah!" Jake pulled her, his voice snapping her back. "This way!" They sprinted, dodging branches that seemed to reach for them, the forest now a labyrinth of twisted roots and shadows. But even as they ran, the chill ran deep in her bones. The presence of the dark lingered, hungry and relentless. "Keep running," she urged, muscles burning, heart racing out of control. All hope flared and dimmed like a fading flame. "Where are we going?" Jake gasped. "Anywhere but here." Suddenly, a massive dark shape surged ahead, blocking their path. It expanded and contorted, shadowy limbs reaching into the void around them. "Foolish mother!" Noah's voice seeped through, echoing with a deep, hollow timbre. "You think you can escape? You are part of this now." The knife glowed hot in her hand, responding, thrumming. She clutched it, shimmering with the energy of those who had come before her. It was not just an object, it was hope, a weapon forged by love and desperation. In that moment, Sarah turned to Jake, her determination solidifying. "We fight back." Just as the darkness lunged, she lunged too, knife raised high. Surrounded by the swirling shadows, she roared, letting the darkness they had conjured push her to strength, pushing back with every ounce of power she had. Would this be enough to turn the tide? Could she truly reclaim Jake from the abyss? The shadows surged forward, and as chaos engulfed them, Sarah braced for what lay ahead. The darkness closed in, suffocating and cold. Sarah's heart hammered louder than the cacophony of whispers surrounding them. The knife felt like a lifeline, a beacon in the suffocating black. As she lunged toward the shadow, the air crackled with energy, filling her with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "No!" Noah howled, as the blade sliced through the void. The shadows recoiled, hissing, while Jake gripped her hand tighter, his small frame shaking beside her. "Just keep going, Mom," he urged, eyes wide with fear yet somehow ignited with hope. But Noah's laughter echoed eerily, reverberating through the twisting woods. "You think you can drive me away? You think this knife holds any real power?" With a swift swipe, he raised his hand, and tendrils of darkness arched toward them like hunting snakes. Sarah felt the air turn thick and frigid, wrapping around her like vine, trying to squeeze the fight out of her. She could see the shadows coiling around Jake, their ghostly forms laughing and taunting. "Noah!" she screamed, desperation blocking out fear. The shadows hesitated, their attention split, wary. Sarah seized the moment. She could feel the warmth of the knife in her grip, pulsing like a heartbeat. This was her chance. She lunged forward again, the knife aimed directly at the core of Noah's swirling dark mass. The moment steel met shadow, a blinding light erupted, pushing against the encroaching blackness. The shadows writhed and screamed, shrill and echoing deep, primal terror cracking through the night. "Jake! Now!" Sarah shouted. They sprinted past the chaos, driven by sheer instinct and the flickering light. But as they passed through the shadows, Sarah felt claws latch onto her ankle, pulling her back. Panic surged through her, raw and intense, and she twisted like a wild animal, dragging herself forward while the knife sliced through the grimy grips. They stumbled away, breathless, but their path was tightening even further. The walls of the forest seemed to close in, trees bending and leaning insidiously, branches grasping and tangling like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with bitterness, reeking of loss and broken dreams. "Faster!" Jake cried, tugging her desperately. In his eyes, she saw fear transform into fierce determination. "Mom! Look!" He pointed, and ahead, the forest opened up into a clearing bathed in dim moonlight. Sarah drew in a breath, catching a fleeting glimpse of something shimmering in the distance, perhaps an exit, perhaps salvation. "That's it," she encouraged, feeling a swell of hope. But just as they approached the light, Noah's voice sliced through the tranquility. "You cannot escape your fate," he bellowed, the shadows moving like a tide behind them, closing in rapidly, bursting into the clearing. Sarah and Jake skidded to a halt. The ground was littered with strange symbols, glowing faintly under the moonlight, a warning, a pact long forgotten. Before they could take another step, the shadows surged from the tree-line, wild and insatiable, spilling into the clearing with a ravenous hunger. They were not just chasing, it was like a coordinated assault, a wave of unrelenting despair crashing against the thin veil of hope Sarah clamped onto. "Stand together!" Sarah shouted as she struck the ground with the knife, sending a shockwave of light across the symbols, igniting them in a brilliant fire. But the shadows faltered for only a moment, recoiling yet still relentless. "Mom, what did I see?" Jake's voice trembled. "What's happening?" This is just the beginning," she whispered, eyes wide with realization. Something deeper lurked in the shadows. Something that needed them as much as they feared it. The night pulsed, the shadows surged forward, howling with the memories of 1,000 souls. And as Sarah raised the knife once more, a figure materialized in the clearing just beyond the light. It stood silently, watching, its presence a consuming void. "Who are you?" Sarah called out, terror creeping into her voice. But the figure remained mute, a watchful phantom cloaked in the night. And in that instant, she understood it wasn't just Noah they had to fight. The true danger was just beginning to reveal itself. What if the shadows didn't want to reclaim Jake, but to enlist him in their dark covenant? A shiver trailed down Sarah's spine as the figure stepped closer, blurring the edges of light. Its face remained obscured, but something deep within the shadows behind it stirred an expectation, a whisper of hunger. Jake clutched her hand tighter, his little fingers trembling, but there was no time for fear to take root. "What do you want?" she shouted, brandishing the knife as if it were a shield against the unknown. She needed answers. The knife gleamed with a desperate light, but it felt small against the oppressive weight of the darkness closing in around them. The figure finally stirred, raising a hand slowly, almost languidly. A cry echoed as the shadows shrieked in defiance. The noise engulfed the clearing, a cacophony of anguish and desperation that nearly sent Sarah to her knees. She grit her teeth, trying to rally her strength. Out of the chaos, a voice emerged, laced with an otherworldly echo. "You have come seeking refuge, yet refuge is a myth in this realm. It resonated like a cracked bell, each syllable echoing a profound sorrow that resonated in their bones. No. Noah's voice rang clear, furious and unyielding. You will not take them. They are mine. Not yours to claim, the figure countered, and an unseen force pressed against Sarah, forcing her to reconsider the knife. The shadows pulsed, swirling around her slowly, like a deceptive dance of darkness. Mom, we can't let him take us. Jake yelled, pulling away, his small frame reflecting a fierce will. No. Sarah gasped, suddenly awash in memories, lost friends, missed opportunities. A weight of forgotten dreams thudded like a drum in her mind. We want to be part of your darkness. Bringing the knife down against the motion in the shadows made the ground tremble. The glowing symbols roared to life, vibrant and furious, while the shadows screamed in protest. They twisted and recoiled, grasping for their master like ants fleeing a flame. Keep fighting. Jake cried, his voice a beacon. We can't give in. But the figure merely watched, its face shrouded in shadows, a twisted smile promising 1,000 secrets dormant beneath its hood. Your resolve is commendable but futile. The pact has been made. As if triggered by its words, the darkness exploded outward, thrusting them backward. Sarah stumbled, but Jake's grip didn't waver. They crashed through a haze of shadows, landing hard on the damp forest floor. The shadows encircled them, their laughter a chilling symphony that mingled with their heavy breathing. Noah. Please. Jake's voice raised in desperation, fragmented and raw. In a heartbeat, Noah's figure surged, inching closer, his eyes aglow with a wicked longing. You cannot save him, Sarah. Accept the darkness. Accept what he truly is. Suddenly, the reality twisted overhead. The symbols glowed hotter, illuminating a doorway in the clearing, a thin veil between worlds. A choice loomed as shadows writhed and pressed toward them. Mom, we can go. Jake urged, releasing her hand, and pointing. We can escape. Jake! Sarah yelled, panic seizing her heart. She couldn't risk losing him to the abyss. The knife pulsed in her grip. It felt alive, but she had to act. Join me, Sarah, the figure interjected smoothly. You can rule the darkness by my side. But its voice sent alarm bells ringing. It felt like an enticing poison, coaxing her into surrender. What do we do? Jake whispered, tears glinting in his eyes. I don't know. She cried, the shadows swirling around, their voices growing louder, echoing memories, fears, her own torments spilling forth. And in that moment, clarity struck. The darkness wanted something more than just to cling to them, it thirsted for their fears to execute its bidding. They had to fight, together. Stay close. Sarah commanded, gripping the knife tighter. She had to lead them out. Just as the shadows lunged, prepared to ensnare them once again, a blinding light erupted from the knife. Sarah willed it forward, aiming at Noah. The darkness thrashed, unable to withstand the brilliance of their hope against its very core, but in a flash, she saw the phantom stretching its arm toward Jake, a dark puppet master, ready to ensnare him into obedience. Jake! She screamed again, and as the light expanded, the shadows seemed to hesitate, whispering in a shared anguish. Then, from the edge of the clearing, something stirred, a glimmer of silver, a shard of something forgotten yet vital. It pulsed against the shadowy guttering. As the tendrils of darkness recoiled, Sarah recognized her next move. But with the figure watching, she knew they needed to reach that light before it was too late. Run! She shouted, the urgency in her voice a desperate push. Would they make it? Would the shadows devour them before they could escape? The choice loomed larger than ever, and the darkness laughed once more, hungry and alive, and when Sarah turned to go, she caught a glimpse of the figure fading into the void, whispering a promise that sent chills racing through her. You cannot escape your true nature. What darkness awaited them on the other side of the light? The light from the knife blazed like a lighthouse, cutting through the tangled underbrush. Sarah grabbed Jake's hand again, yanking him towards that shimmering glimmer. Each step felt like running through molasses as the darkness writhed behind them, clawing at the edges of their consciousness. "Keep running, Mom. Don't let go." Jake's voice pierced the muffling blanket of shadows, igniting Sarah's resolve. She couldn't falter now. The flicker of silver was so close, yet the air felt thick with malice. It was as if something unseen was colliding with their very souls, desperate to drag them back. With every heartbeat, panic clawed at her. She felt it build, a pressure in her chest that made it hard to breathe. The chilling laughter echoed behind them, an ever-present reminder of the entity that hungered for fear, for despair. Then she caught a glimpse of Noah, his spectral form twisting and arching, desperation radiating from him. Would he turn? Would he fall to the darkness, become just another phantom lost to the void? "Noah!" She screamed, the name a prayer, a plea to return to the light. His eyes dimmed, reflecting both a yearning and a struggle. "You can't take him, I want to let you," he whispered, but the shadows wrapped around him, thick tendrils of despair that stretched like icy fingers into the heart of the clearing. He was trapped, caught between an unholy pact and the shimmer of their hope. "Mom!" Jake cried again, yanking her focus back. He was looking back to Noah, his little face twisted with fear. What if he can't come? "It's not over yet, Jake. We can't give in." She felt the knife pulse with each reassured breath, the warmth of its light pushing back against the creeping chill. Seconds felt like hours as they hurtled towards that flickering possibility. The shadows swirled and lashed around them, slapping like icy rain. Sarah gritted her teeth against the growing dread, feeling it seep into her bones. "Mom, please." He stumbled, the weight of the fear pulling him down. What if? But he couldn't finish. "No." She knelt, locking eyes with him, summoning each ounce of strength. "We are stronger than this." She was trying, fighting against the shadows, refusing to let them tether her to any darkness. With a deep breath, she thrust the knife toward the quickly approaching light, and in a surge, it flared, a star exploding in the night. The air shimmered, separating the dark realms, revealing a path through the chaos, but as the light expanded, the figure materialized again, sliding effortlessly along the edges of their vision. It had been waiting, patient and calculating. "You think you can sever the bond? It is woven into the very fabric of your existence. Mom, look!" Jake yelled as he pointed toward the light's base, pulsing as if giving them hope. "Go, Jake. Now!" Sarah urged, willing him forward, ignoring the figure's mocking smile. The shadows lunged like a pack of wolves, but she raised the knife and, with all her strength, swung it toward the encroaching mass. A shatter rang out, the sound of 1,000 threads snapping. Light erupted, and the shadows recoiled, screeching in pain, but they would not be vanquished. "Do you truly think you can escape?" The figure hissed, its voice weaving through her mind, dark and seductive. "You carry your darkness within you, Sarah. Let it consume you." "No. It's not who I am." She turned, their shared bond cutting through the fog of fear. "Together, Jake." But just as they made to leap towards the light, a cold wind howled, one drenched in anguish. Darkness surged, pulling at their feet, trying to tether them back to the shadows that writhed like live wires. The pulsing light blinked, trembling against the encroaching despair, but it worked like a beacon. They had to reach it. With a final push, Sarah and Jake surged forward, hands clasped tight, but the shadows grasped at them, shrieking with rage and betrayal. Noah's voice echoed, softening with regret. "Don't let go, keep running." Sarah screamed as the ground shook beneath them. But just as they neared the light, it flickered one last time, and with a fierce, thunderous crack, everything erupted into darkness once more. And then, silence. Where were they? Had they escaped, or had the shadows pulled them back into a stasis of despair? As the weight of the darkness pressed in again, Sarah felt the knife grow cold in her hand, the crackling light that had once burned bright now snuffed out. A shiver danced across her spine, and she knew they hadn't escaped. Behind them, the figure's chuckle echoed, low and haunted. It is not yet time to wake what awaited them now in this void of endless night. The silence was deafening. Sarah and Jake floated in an abyss that felt heavy, smothering, like a suffocating cloud promised to drown them in despair. Mom, Jake's voice came, a haunting whisper that broke her heart. The darkness circled them, wrapping tighter, and she felt the heaviness of hopelessness tugging at her like chains. "Jake! I'm here!" she shouted, trying to sound brave, even though fear pricked at her edges. Her heart raced as she fumbled in the dark, searching for any solid ground. "We're not lost. We can't be." But deep down, the thought nagged at her like an unwelcome guest. Suddenly, the air shifted, as if it were alive and charged with a disembodied energy. Shadows twisted around her, swirling and crashing into each other as if debating their next move. A thought flashed in her mind. Was this the end? Was she about to lose everything? "Mom, I'm scared." Jake's voice trembled through the murk. "No, no, no. Don't be. We're going to be okay, you have to believe me." She felt the sweat dripping down her back, feeling time slipping through her fingers like the snow beneath their feet back in Coldwater Bend, and then, amid the darkness, a light flickered. It was faint but undeniable, a distant twinkle of hope that sparked in the void. Sarah's heart quickened. "Jake, there. Do you see that?" "Yes." His tiny voice exploded with excitement, bouncing off the walls of despair. With the chill of terror still biting at her heels, she pulled him closer, feelings of dread starkly giving way to renewed courage. "That's our way out. We can reach it." They moved together, hand in hand, the anxiety of the shadows still trying to cling to their heels as they approached that fiery shimmer. Every step pushed them deeper, yet with each rhythm of their feet, the shadows seemed to hiss, their whispers rising to a fever pitch, pleading, mocking. "Don't listen. Keep going," Sarah urged, breathing heavily. The light surged closer now, brighter, a living entity dancing just beyond the reach of their fingers. And as they drew near, shadows collided, swirling in furious disorder, launching towards them with a ferocity that tore at Sarah's heart. "No!" she shouted again, pure adrenaline coursing through her veins, and she instinctively raised the knife, feeling an ancient instinct rise within her. "This is for every soul you've taken. You will not take us." Once more the blade pulsed, pushing the shadows back, thrumming with the power of their will, illuminating the path ahead. "Keep running. We're almost there." The shadows shrieked, a deafening chorus filled with anguish and rage, but she pressed on, Jake's small hand leading her right to the edge of that flickering light. It felt warm, inviting, but they weren't there yet. The air shook around them, vibrating with the intensity of the darkness trying to reclaim its lost prey. Pain shot through her ankle as a tendril of darkness latched on, trying to drag her back. "Hold on, Jake. Just keep running." The knife gleamed in her grip, a final surge of strength burning inside her, igniting a fierce wave of defiance. "Now!" she bellowed, the force of her will breaking through the lingering despair. With one final, desperate push, they leaped into the light, Sarah feeling the shadows clawing at her with every ounce of desperation they had. But the brilliance engulfed them completely, lighting up her world in a dazzling explosion, filling the air with warmth that washed away the chill of the darkness, and just like that silence fell again, Sarah opened her eyes, heart pounding, breath heaving. They were back standing in the middle of Coldwater Bend, the sun spilling warmth across the familiar landscape, casting aside the shadows of the ominous woods. The warmth of the morning wrapped around them like a blanket, the air bright and alive. "Mom!" Jake's voice broke through her stupor. "We made it. We're home." Tears streamed down her face as she sank to her knees, the weight of fear sliding off her shoulders like a forgotten promise. Jake's sweet, innocent laughter rang out, echoing joyfully as he hopped from one snowbank to Another, completely unaware of what had just transpired, but that darkness had not been vanquished. It lingered. The shadows had been sealed, but Sarah felt a sharp sensation this time, a thread of darkness still wrapped around the edges of her heart, whispering of old pacts and unbroken ties. "This isn't over," she murmured softly to herself, standing tall and steady. "This is just the beginning. I will protect you, Jake. Always." As she watched him play, bubbling with laughter, the shadows receded further. But the journey had changed her. She had looked into the abyss and had emerged a mother resolute. "Hey, buddy," Sarah called out, her voice now confident. "Let's get some hot cocoa. We've got a lot of stories to tell and a long way to go." With one last glance toward the distant woods, she took a deep breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The past may have haunted them, but their future? That was theirs to create. United as mother and son. With hope glimmering in her heart, Sarah and Jake walked hand in hand, ready to embrace everything Coldwater Bend had to offer. Because no matter what horrors lay in the past, family would always be their greatest light. This is just the beginning for them. And don't forget, you need to subscribe now. Click that button immediately so you won't miss the next exclusive stories unfolding. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and boost our community. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What did you think? And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support and spread the word. This is the moment to show your support. We're in this together.